Travis, how are you today, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, my man. I genuinely appreciate it.
Oh, dude, no, thank you for having us, man. We really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, I want to dive right in now. I'll be the first one to admit, man, I was a fan of the band from first listen, and I found Girlfriends in the way that I think a lot of people find music in this day and age. A friend shared a playlist, and there was a single from your record called Jessica that immediately reached out and grabbed me, and I was hooked from minute one. That one just hit me in a way that I hadn't been hit in a really, really long time, and then dug in and found the full length. And the two initial singles, which California, Eyes Wide Shut, just kept even more of my interest, and I have been a fan ever since, sir.
Dude, thank you so much, man. I mean, I think that's kind of, just how people discover music nowadays, right? Like when I was growing up, like we would make mixtapes and kind of CDs and like write on them with Sharpies and pass them around to our friends. And now we just copy a link and text it to someone, and like there's a playlist, which is amazing. Just like that's how we're consuming and discovering new acts right now. And for Nick and I, we started this band in December of 2019, right before the pandemic. And obviously when everything happened, we were like, how is this gonna go? No one knows who we are. How are we gonna get people to listen to the music? And we've just put out good songs, and I feel like people are finding them, and yeah, it's just kind of growing and building. So thank you so much, man, for the kind words and the support.
Oh, happy to thrust that out into the world, my man. What I love is that there's this new sort of approach to what everybody kind of refers to as pop punk, right? But in the early days of its sort of like public eye, like its sort of coming out party of pop punk in the early 2000s, a lot of bands were leaning more into the punk side. And here we are in 2022, and you've got bands like All Time Low and the band Camino, and now Girlfriends that are leaning a little bit more into the pop side of things. And I, for one, am not upset at that. As somebody that grew up on artists like The Cars and INXS, I love those big, amazing hooks that are in every single one of the songs. And I hope that this is the trend that pop punk takes going forward. Not that I don't love punk rock. I mean, I grew up in the Syracuse hardcore scene, so I have an affinity for that as well. But growing up loving like well-crafted pop songs is something that makes me very happy to see bands like Girlfriends, band Camino, the main All Time Low continuing to perpetuate into the future.
Thank you, man. I mean, I have to agree. I think, I grew up like on hardcore, on death metal, and going to Warped Tour, right? Like since I was a kid, and like was very much invested in like the local scene and kind of all of like the DIY movement. And so I feel like I'm like an encyclopedia of like pop punk and emo just from like my childhood. And the fact that, people nowadays who have never, I mean, you'd be surprised, like who have never listened to bands like MXPX or Blink-182 or NoFX or, Less Than Jake, bands that I grew up loving, are now discovering these bands like Weezer and stuff like that. It's amazing, man. You look at a band like All Time Low, who's having, arguably one of the biggest years of their career ever. And it's now, I mean, especially at a format like radio, like who would have thought that, like 5 years ago? And the fact that rock music is back and like guitars are back and you kind of see it spread out like through all kind of different genres of popular music is a beautiful thing. And I think what Nick and I are doing, like, it's just kind of infusing the music that we grew up loving and listening to into the music that we're making now. And we're having fun doing it. So it's definitely exciting.
Well, I adore the fact that, I know that you're tied in with John Feldmann. And one of my first thoughts in hearing the early stuff from Girlfriends when I was first turned on to the band was, my immediate thought was, man, this sure does sound like a John Feldmann production. And lo and behold, it was. John is that dude that just puts those little touches into records like this. I mean, he's a dude that's run the gamut, obviously, with Goldfinger back in the day. But, he's worked with Avril Lavigne recently. He has credits with 5 Seconds of Summer and a whole list of other bands, including Blink-182 and even other upstart bands like Poor Stacy, right? Like the dude just has this magical thing. And I think it's a perfect amalgamation, right? I think that Girlfriends writes the style of music that John is best at producing. And I think, man, it's a match made in heaven, in my opinion.
Thank you, dude. I mean, you talked about like your love for you know, those big pop hooks. And I mean, Goldfinger and John Feldman is a perfect example of that. And I've known John for years. Obviously, like Nick, you know, Nick and John are close as well. So when we get into the studio with someone like Feldy, it doesn't feel like work. You know, we're hanging out with our friends, and that's like the perfect space to allow us to kind of have fun and be ourselves and make the music that, you know, we want to make. And I think, you know, with our new song High Again, that's like kind of a perfect representation of, you know, walking that line between, you know, a big kind of pop melody, right, and like a hook, and something that's true and authentic to ourselves. You know, me personally, I wrote that song after like, I don't know, almost like a year and a half of being completely sober. And, you know, it was my birthday, and the next day we were in the studio, and I had some fun on my birthday, and I wanted to talk about it in a song. And I really loved Panic at the Disco had this song 9 in the Afternoon, and I loved the irony of all the lyrics and how they didn't make any sense. And so I wanted to write that from my perspective. And I feel like we walked out of that, you know, with High Again, and that was really cool for us.
And you've definitely sort of touched a nerve with High Again as well, right? There's an honesty to that song because it's so personal to you. And I think what really drew me to it is the fact that, like, you're talking about real things that all of us have dealt with over the last couple of years with the pandemic, isolation, depression. It hits me even more as, you know, somebody who's been in recovery for the last 11 years, right? Like, there's an honest and earnest nature to that song. There's a raw nerve that I think is something that is going to help connect girlfriends to an audience because it is so authentic.
Thank you, man. And yeah, I mean, you know, as kind of surface level as the lyrics are from first listen, like they're not as literal as someone might take them. You know, I feel like I wrote that song from a perspective of someone who, on the surface, everything looks fine, right? And people would think like, yo, you're supposed to have this amazing life, and, you know, you're doing what you love, and, you know, you have all these people around you who love you and support you, and you get to go on tour and do all this amazing shit. But at the same time, like, the voice inside my head is the complete opposite. And it's like, hey, you're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. You're not going to make it, you know? And it's like this juxtaposition of like these kind of two worlds clashing. And, you know, I felt like that when I was, you know, 13, and I feel like that at 30, you know? And that's just kind of like the struggle of every day. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
Absolutely. And there's a certain element of courage that it takes to be so honest and to be so open. And I'm hoping that this is yet another song that makes its way into the mainstream, that helps take that stigma away from opening that conversation about mental health and how all of us feel depressed and isolated at times. And I give you a lot of credit for being an open book, so to speak, in regards to that and in addressing it. And I know just going through the internet and reading, you know, places like Reddit and your social media and seeing the impact that it's had on your fan base is very admirable. So I just kind of wanted to mention that and say thank you, because as somebody that's quite a bit older, like, I love seeing somebody who has legitimate clout in the world like yourself addressing things that are well beyond the surface of things. I think there's you know, I mean, speaking of stigmas, I mean, pop punk for the longest time was all about the party and pizza and, you know, what Vans you're wearing and all of that. And then as time progressed, there became more addressing of real life issues. And the fact that you're taking that part of it and perpetuating it into the future is something that should be heralded in 2022.
Thank you, man. I mean, I think we're at a great place, like, in culture right now, where you can be open and vulnerable, you know, with your audience. And that's like what people want to hear. I know, like, when I first started making music, I mean, you know, I've suffered from like depression and anxiety and panic attacks my entire life, but I wasn't able to talk about those things just because that wasn't stuff that, you know, that wasn't talked about. It was really taboo, and, you know, I didn't know how to express myself. And so when we started the band, I was like, I'm going to use this vessel to be unapologetically authentic, you know, and like speak my truth. And if it connects, and it sounds corny, and I know a lot of artists say it, but like literally if one person hears it and it helps them, then it did enough. I don't care about like the streams or tickets or whatever, you know. And if you ever come to a show, like, that's a big emphasis that I talk about on stage, is like my journey with mental health, and how I feel like we all kind of need to rally around each other and lift each other up, and just be present, man, and just be like a shoulder to lean on, be an ear to listen to, and, you know, have a support system. Because I know, like, when I was growing up, I didn't really have that. And it's isolating, and it feels overwhelming at times. And there was a lot of times when I wanted to give up, and I had a lot of friends who did, you know, and who aren't here today. And so the fact that I am, and I can like use my story and my voice and the platform that you were mentioning to talk to other people out there that are going through similar shit is something that I will gladly do for the rest of my life.
I'm really, really like genuinely, it's heartwarming to hear you say that, and it means a lot. So thank you very much for that. The single is called High Again. It's available everywhere music is available. I have a feeling it's going to take radio by storm this summer. And man, you know, if there was anything, I try to spin everything as positive as possible, right? So like the pandemic gave all of us a breath, whether we wanted it or not. We got to spend some time at home. We got to spend some time with people. Artists like yourselves had a chance to break that cycle of write, record, press, tour, write, record, press, tour, right? Gave you a chance to tap into that artistry that sometimes you can't because time just doesn't allow it. But the thing that the pandemic did take from us was the ability to get Girlfriends going on what I consider to be one of the best debut albums in the genre. I genuinely hope that there's some touring in the future and that you guys are given the opportunity to take the world over, because just based on the music alone, man, you certainly deserve it.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah, we just announced the West Coast leg of our tour. I know that doesn't help you out. You're in Syracuse, but East Coast is coming up next, man. So yeah, June we hit the West Coast for some dates. It's our first time ever headlining, and we did some support runs last year, which was really fun. But this time we get to play a ton of songs. You know what I mean? We get to kind of curate the show how we want to curate it. And when we hit the East Coast, hopefully you can come and hang, man.
100%. And I'll tell you this, man, there is always a place for you in Syracuse to come and rock the house.
Dude, I thank you so much. I love the East Coast, and yeah, every time I'm over there, it's super fun. Maybe we'll try to do it though, like before winter, because I'm a little baby with the cold.
Well, we are in what is called the snow belt, sir. So let's try and get you out here, but before we get bombarded with snow.
That sounds like a plan.
Very cool. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time today. I know you're a very busy dude. You've got a lot on your plate. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the people that I can see in the chat that you're taking the time to do this. Once again, this is Travis Mills of the band Girlfriends. If you haven't heard of them, you will soon. Check out the single High Again. We'll be playing it Sunday nights on The Fringe on 95X, and hopefully more stations will be playing it as 2022 progresses. Travis, thank you again, not only for your time today, but for the message you're putting out there with the new single. It truly is something that I'm very stoked to see out there in the world.
Dude, thank you for having me, and thank you for the support, man. It means the world. You have no idea.
Awesome, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
Cool. You too, brother. Peace.
Take care, man.